In this session, we're going to be continuing to look at the work of Frida Kahlo, and we're going to be trying to answer the question of how did Frida Kahlo's cultural background affect her art? So what we're thinking about this is where Frida Kahlo was born, where she grew up, where she lived her life, and how the things around her, the culture of that country, affected the work that she did and helped influence things that she did. Now, in order to do that, we're going to be thinking about three separate parts. The first thing is we're going to be looking at some ideas of Mexican folk art. So we're going to be thinking about the things that make that sort of artwork stand out. So if you went into an art gallery, for example, and you spotted a section on Mexican folk art, what you'd be expecting to see is patterns and ideas and themes running through them all. Then what we're going to be thinking about is looking at a piece of artwork from Frida Kahlo. It's how those ideas, how those patterns, how those creations bleed their way into Frida Kahlo's own work. So thinking about those artworks we've looked at previously, what is it in there that we can see definitely points out that this is someone who comes from Mexico, this is someone who's grown up in Mexico, with Mexican culture all around her. And then what we're going to be thinking about is some of our own designs, and this time what we're going to be thinking about how we can express our own cultural identity, be that the country we're living in now, or be that a country that we're connected to through family and through background, and how we can use that in our own artwork. So to begin with, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a painting by Frida Kahlo. And I want you to think about some questions as we're revealing this. I want you to think about sort of what do you think this painting is about? What do you think Frida Kahlo's actually painted here? What are the things you notice about it? So what jumps out when you look at this picture? What things, so you go, oh, I noticed this. Then I want you to be thinking about all those different pieces of artwork we've seen previously in this unit that Frida Kahlo painted and created. And I want you to be thinking about what is different about the artwork we're looking at now. And on the other hand, what do we think is similar? So let's have a look at this painting and think about these questions. So looking at just this one section, what do you think this painting could be of? What's the first thing that you notice about this picture? Is there anything that's sort of jumping out at you? Maybe some colours, maybe a mood that's being represented. Maybe you've noticed what this actual thing could be. Is there anything that you're noticing straight away that you're going, this seems very different than the Frida Kahlo paintings that I've analysed previously? Or alternatively, are you thinking that there's lots of things that are similar to that painting? Now we can see a little bit more of the painting. What are your thoughts about it now? So any more ideas about what this painting could be? Anything that you notice that jumps out at you sort of looking at these two sections? You notice any of those differences or similarities between the previous Frida Kahlo artwork you've been analysing and looking at? So now we see the whole of this painting. I want you to pause the video and I want you to be thinking about these four questions. So what do you think this is a painting of? What can you notice when you actually look at this painting? Is there anything that jumps out at you? Maybe the items being used, maybe the colours being used, maybe a mood that's being created by this artwork. Do you notice any of those differences and similarities between other Frida Kahlo paintings? So pause the video, looking at this whole painting, I just want you to think about those four questions and then come and join me when you're ready to share your ideas. Now, as we can see by looking at this picture, we can see that it's a still life. So it's got that idea of fruits where Frida Kahlo is trying to paint them in a way that shows the realistic nature of them. And then we can see an animal sat with that fruit, watching over it. Now, Frida Kahlo is very proud of her Mexican heritage, and it's incorporated into many of her paintings which express her identity as a proud Mexican. And this painting is a wonderful example of that, and how she integrated different aspects of traditional Mexican culture and folk art into her paintings. So when we look at this painting, what we can see are the fruits which are indigenous, which means they're native, they belong to Mexico. These are fruits that Frida Kahlo would have seen as she walked around her neighborhood, growing on trees, things she would have seen in market stalls. So this image would be very familiar to her. The animal that she's used, well, this is an indigenous species of bird to Mexico. And again, it's going to be something that she will have seen as she's been wandering around on her daily life. And this is one of the big things that Frida Kahlo populates her paintings with. It's that idea of her Mexican identity. And hopefully one of the things that you will have noticed about the paintings from Frida Kahlo is the bright colours that she's been using. Because Mexican folk art and the culture is full of these bright colours and these geometric patterns. So lots of pieces of embroidered or woven materials are used, and they use nature as an inspiration. So when you're looking at these images, you'll notice that there's plants, flowers and animals which are all common in their design. And if we take a look at one of Frida Kahlo's paintings, we can see this jumping out at us straight away, those similarities, those sort of influences that have been taken from the work that she's had around her all her life. Now, in many of her paintings, we see images of Frida Kahlo wearing these clothes, this traditional Mexican skirts and dresses, as well as traditional Mexican jewelry. And she did this because she was expressing her love of the Mexican culture through the clothes and the jewelry that she actually wore. She also included many exotic animals in her painting. Now, these were usually pets she owned, or that she used as a symbol of Mexican culture. So again, these are animals that she would have seen around and about. These wouldn't be unfamiliar to her because these are actual animals that were living indigenously within her local area. However, Frida Kahlo didn't stay in Mexico for her whole life. Kahlo's husband, the man that you can see in the picture here, was also a famous artist who was well known for his own work. And lots of people wanted him to paint for them, which meant they had to travel around quite a lot. And they travelled around North America. Now, knowing how proud Kahlo was of her Mexican heritage, how do you think she would have felt about moving to another country? Pause the video for a moment and think about that question, and come and join me when you've got an idea or an opinion on how Frida Kahlo might have felt having to leave Mexico and travel around, and your reasons for that. So Frida Kahlo, when she did move to America, she longed to return to Mexico the whole time she was away. And this feeling we can see in several of the paintings that she did when she lived there. Here's an example of one of them. So she continued to wear the traditional Mexican dresses with bright colours. She carried on using those ideas of patterns and embroidery linked really closely to the Mexican identity that she has. And it allowed her to express that identity and keep her connected to it despite how far away she was. Her clothing that you see models in these paintings even inspired a fashion designer to create a whole line of clothing based on the Frida Kahlo style. Now, as a society today, especially in this country, we mix aspects from so many different cultures in our clothing and our possessions in order to express exactly who we are and our own personal identity. These aspects might come from the country we live in, from our religious belief, or from a community that we're part of. So I just want you to think now about this question and pause the video. Can you think of any ways that you personally express your own identity? And does this show the communities that you are part of? We can see the two images here. We can see people wearing kilts because they are linked to Scotland and that Celtic lifestyle. If we look at the people on the right-hand side, we've got people dressed in traditional Indian clothes. But also we've got the idea that they're drinking cups of tea. So maybe these could be people who are Indian who also live in the United Kingdom. So we can see the different ideas being shown in here because, of course, everything we do wear, everything that we surround ourselves is us making a conscious decision of how we want to appear to other people. So pause the video and I want you to think about those ways that you express who you are and how your communities, how maybe countries of origin, groups and clubs that you belong to get represented in what you actually choose to wear, how you are chosen to be seen. So now it's time to do some work, and what we're going to do is we're going to try and create some artwork which is going to allow us to show our culture, our idea of who we are. And to help us do that, on our assignments, we've got our first activity, which is some questions for you just to complete. And these are going to hopefully guide you and direct you and make this next part of the work a little bit more simplistic. So when we're thinking about this, think about how you can answer these questions and answer them as honestly as possible. Don't worry about what your friends might say or anything like that. This has to be about you being personally that person. A little bit like Frida Kahlo. She was quite obviously her own person. She didn't try and change herself for other people, but at the same time she really wanted to present herself in a particular way. That's how we're going to be asking you to do it. So we're going to use these questions to help think about what could be included in this self-portrait. And once you've managed to answer those questions, then you're going to come on to the second part of our activity, which is where we're going to be creating our own Frida Kahlo style self-portrait. Now, for this, what I want you to do is I want you to choose an aspect of your identity by looking at those questions that you can incorporate and place into this. Now, that could be, for example, colours of a flag from your background, or maybe clothing that represents where you're from. Maybe it's a type of music, or different hobbies that could influence your clothing, or maybe even items that go around you. Now, when it comes to your actual self-portrait itself, for this you could maybe stick a photograph of yourself on there, or maybe you're going to sketch yourself a quick self-portrait, but the focus is going to be about that background today. So we're going to be looking at the idea of how are you representing yourself in this self-portrait. So have you got some different colours that represent your country of origin, your family's background? Maybe you've got clothing that sort of represents some interests you have, maybe a sport you play, maybe a club you belong to, and then maybe you've got some different items that can be there, just like Frida Kahlo did with her birds, for example. Maybe you've got some animals that you feel represent yourself. So I'd like you to finish that activity and think about, once it's complete, how you have represented yourself. I look forward to seeing this work, so once you've finished it would be brilliant if you could take a picture and post it onto our Teams channel so we can share it with everyone else.